right.
All right, so thanks everybody for coming. We're gonna have a hopefully a friendly debate about the vaccine today, and with me now is Azakreth. Is that how you say your name?
Yep.
Azakreth. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and like give like a maybe brief overview of your political views, that would be great.
Great. Awesome. I'm Azagreth. I sometimes go on various different streams and whatnot, do some like little discussion. My political views. I've done a lot of political. I wouldn't say vacillation, but from one, the meme response I gave is that I'm like radical, like politically when it comes to that. I was like a pragmatic centrist in positions, right? But I have a lot of sympathies with I think what it's called Christian democracy. What's like in Europe, like this idea of Christian democracy. Um, and that's kind of where I stand when it comes to the vaccine. It's just I'm broadly in favor of people getting it, regardless of age categories.
All
So yeah,
right.
sometimes I'd be on Twitch. What you can find now is I don't have a lot of content up there now, but like you can find me like 3D printing some stuff, talking with a few people and all that other stuff.
Cool. Well, yeah, if you want to post your link at any point in
Sure,
the Trovo
will do.
chat, you can go ahead and do that.
Will do.
Uh, All right, well, I guess I'll get started. So, a few things that I want to cover regarding the vaccine. Uh, the main thing is there's certain age groups where you could pretty much say that there's no real practical reason for these people to get the vaccine. So the main thing I want to focus on is the 12 boys age 12 to 17. So there was a study that recently came out that said myocarditis between boys 12 to 15 is about 6 times more prevalent than serious COVID symptoms. And boys age 16 and 17, it's about 2 times more likely than serious COVID symptoms. So you have this age range of 12 to 17 where it's significantly more likely that they're going to get side effects, very deathly side effects, because myocarditis has a 66% 5-year mortality rate. So these are very deathly side effects that are very prevalent. Well, it's hard to say very prevalent because it's still not very much, but it's significantly higher than their chance of dying via the virus, right? If you look at the IFR for these age groups, pretty much anybody under 30, the IFR for the age range of 0 to 30 is about 0.003 to 0.005%. And then if you take this same age range, so 0 to 30, and look at that specific number, so if we take an average of 0.003 to 0.005, you get 0.004% chance of COVID death, right? So IFR, that means infected fatality rates. That means chance of dying if you are infected with COVID. And so if you look at VAERS data, I don't know how much you trust VAERS data, but considering this is the only data that we have, I think we should take it fairly seriously. So the most recent VAERS update put vaccine adverse events at about 700,000 for all the people that have been vaccinated. So if you take 700,000 and divide that by the amount of people that have gotten vaccinated, that's about 0.004% chance of a major side effect if you get the vaccine. And so this is including certain things that are not that serious, like, so pretty much if you just get things like headache, things like that. So that's an adverse event, but included in this number is 14,000 deaths and 20,000 people becoming severely disabled. So not nearly as high of the 700,000 number, but also this 700,000 number, this has a lot of variance to it. So there's a few Harvard studies that have come out, about 3 of them, and these all say that they think that the VAERS data, looking at it historically, only measures about 10% of the actual amounts of adverse events, because these are all self-reported. So none of this is coming from like a serious collection of data, right? It's just people self-reporting what kind of adverse events that they're getting. So some people say that that means it's going to be less than accurate, but this is a database that has been used historically, and we have a lot more data for it this with this vaccine than previous vaccines. So maybe we don't have quite as much as a only 10% rate of report, but we can still say that it's probably going to be underreported. So using those numbers, right, we can say we have about a similar chance of having a severe reaction to the vaccine as you have of dying from the virus if you're in the age range of 0 to 34. And now I think most people that are going to be watching this and paying attention to it are probably within that age range. So I find it very hard to make an argument that a person, especially a person from this, a male from the 12 to 17 range, I don't see how you could possibly justify that they get the vaccine. And then if you're outside of that range but still under 34, it seems the risks and benefits are just about equal. So even if you choose to take the vaccine, that should be a personal choice. I don't see how you can force somebody into taking something that has, like I said, about equal risk versus benefit ratio. So I guess that's pretty much the data that I wanted to get out in the open and form an opening statement. So if you have any response to that, that would be good.
So this is you got me a few things to start about. So broadly speaking, um, uh, my position is that the vaccine is safe and effective for effectively all the age ranges and a lot of the age ranges that like you described. Now I don't know what the VARS system is, but I'm in Canada, right? And Health Canada it like was keeping a tally of what you said like vaccine adverse events to the COVID-19 vaccine since the beginning of the vaccination process back in January, right? And if we're going to talk about numbers and stuff, um, Health Canada, right, has reported, I think, 17,000 adverse events, with about 4,000 being serious. Now, what a serious adverse event, so 4,000 adverse events, serious adverse events, and a serious adverse event is essentially an adverse event that results in a hospitalization. So, since the beginning of the entire vaccination campaign, with like 30 million people like I wouldn't say 30 million people vaccinated, but like there's 30 million people in the country. I think it was a 70% of the population. I forget if it was population or eligible population got vaccinated. So that's like at the very least a decent million amount of doses taken, with only about 4,000 at like what you said. There's like an adverse event that is happening. Meanwhile, if you uh, kind of look at the amount of people that are getting sick daily from COVID, it highly exceeds that number. And if you look at the people that have like suffered very, very bad risks from COVID, it definitely exceeds that number. Like, so if we can just like have like a bit of a start here, is that if kind of let's just say that the males 12 to 17 is a contentious category, right? And for everybody else, right, would you like recommend that they take the vaccine? Like you personally?
I would recommend that it should be a personal choice. I would recommend that.
Right. Okay. Sure. Personal choice. But would you recommend that they do it? Right. Like from your knowledge, do you think that they should get vaccinated? Because once again, COVID's like, it's a fairly bad condition. Sure. If you're very, very healthy, you might get away with not being very, very sick. But you're effectively, I wouldn't say just rolling the dice, but you're also rolling the dice with potentially infecting other people, because for the entire period that you have symptoms, especially with the Delta variant, you're going to infect on average about 6 people. And so when you boil that out to like the population level, when you have a country of millions and millions of people, you have thousands and thousands of people that are getting that vaccine. By you getting vaccinated, effectively what you're doing is you're preventing a lot of that spread from occurring and going through. So like if we're talking about health risks to yourself, right, would you kind of agree that like outside of like these few myocarditis studies, and we can talk about that later, but outside of this 12 to 17 males, right, or 18 to 30 males, right, would you recommend the vaccine for that population, which is a vast majority of like personally, would you recommend getting a vaccine for that population?
So I think that would basically depend on comorbidities. Because if you look at vaccine deaths, virus deaths, and this is, once again, this is data coming from the CDC. 95% of people who die of COVID have comorbidities, and of that 95%, the average number of comorbidities is 4. So a person like myself with 0 comorbidities, I would say no. I don't
Mhm.
think I have
But you
any
would still
realistic
be able
chance.
to, but you would still be able to spread it to somebody that is potentially unvaccinated that does have those comorbidities.
Well, I think that point is becoming increasingly irrelevant because we're seeing that the vaccine itself does not prevent the spread of the virus. And even early on, there was a study back in early spring from Massachusetts that basically said that it was a Massachusetts breakthrough COVID case study, and of these people in Massachusetts who had the virus, is something like about 75% of them were vaccinated. And a lot of people are going to say, well, as the population becomes increasingly vaccinated, more people, the people infected, a larger percent of them are going to be vaccinated. And while that is true, the interesting thing about the study was that it measured the amount of COVID, viral load inside the nose and throat of these people between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and found that it was virtually the same. So there's really nothing in this vaccine that's preventing you from spreading the virus to other people. And this is, within the past few weeks, confirmed by the CDC itself. So Rachel Walensky, if you know her from the CDC, she basically said that no, the vaccine does not prevent transmission right now. So this is becoming an irrelevant point. You're not actually protecting anybody else by getting the vaccine. So I don't know how you could make it. So earlier there was this point, right?
Okay,
You
so
could say if it's not, if you find it not safe for yourself, it might actually benefit other people. But I think that there's no longer that argument that you're benefiting other people and doing
no,
something
no,
for
so
the greater good.
right, no, no, so that actually wasn't necessarily what my point was, right? But let's kind of just go on that. What do you think would be the goal of a herd immunity, let's say, of a vaccination campaign, right? So you're whatever you're trying to do a vaccination campaign against a certain disease. What would be the goal of that vaccination campaign, right? What would be the goal? If you're the government, what's the goal of any sort of vaccination campaign? Right? When it comes to COVID or to measles or to MMR or to polio or smallpox or whatever, what is the goal of the vaccination campaign, generally speaking?
I guess to contain the spread of the virus to the point
To
where
contain the spread of the virus and build up herd immunity within the population, right? And so the idea of herd immunity is that if you have somebody that does have either a natural immunity or a vaccine immunity, like a vaccinated immunity, because the body has already encountered the the pathogen, right? Then that person will like then the disease, if it infects somebody, will effectively be contained within that. And because everybody around them is also vaccinated to a large degree, it won't spread to these vulnerable populations that won't can't get vaccinated. That's kind of the goal of really from like a government perspective, the goal of a vaccination campaign is to build up that herd immunity. Now, I want to ask a question. How do you think? What is your perception of how a vaccine works within the body?
my understanding.
Yeah, what's your understanding of how a vaccine, like, when you get injected with vaccine, what happens to the body, right?
Uh,
Versus what happens, right? So how does that
so
work?
a normal vaccine versus this
Yeah,
vaccine.
just any, yeah, just no, just any sort, any vaccine.
Well, a typical
Well, two things.
vaccine, yes.
No, two things. Like vaccines in general, and what do you think is happening with these vaccines?
So a normal vaccine is going to give you a small dose of the actual virus itself, so that you can produce antibodies to the virus. So when you encounter the actual virus, you already have the antibodies prepared to fight it off. Versus this mRNA vaccine is injecting you with mRNA that tells your cells to produce spike proteins that are supposed to do the same job as the antibodies.
So, right, yeah, okay. So the idea behind the mRNA vaccine, right, is that these antibodies, right, so antibodies are a type of cell within the immune system that bonds to something called an antigen, right? So you have the antibody and the antigen, right? And when it comes to viruses and stuff, the spike protein, right, is what the antibodies bond on the virus. It's what the antibodies detect, right? And your body, right, doesn't have like this infinite amount of antibodies right off the get-go, right? It has to basically take some time in order for the basically your body has what's essentially an antibody producing factory. It requires some time to warm up, just like any good machine, right? Like any machine takes some time to warm up, and that can take like up to a few days if your body already knows like what it is. So what happens usually in a vaccine, right, is that your immune system has the same response as if it was a like an actual illness, right? This infected, right? But because it's either deactivated or a weaker version, the virus doesn't cause as much damage to your body, so you don't feel as many symptoms, right? But naturally, when you encounter something for the first time, it takes your body much, much longer to produce those antibodies because what your body is essentially doing is it's attempting to produce antibodies at random just to see what works. And when it does find something that works, it basically there's signals that basically tell the rest of your immune system these antibodies are bonding onto something on the surface of this pathogen, and so we're going to destroy that. And so stop producing all the other random stuff, only produce us, right? And then after the pathogens are gone, uh, a lot of those cells that are producing the antibodies die off, except for like a handful of them. And those become your memory cells, and those produce just a bit of the antibodies, so that if your body encounters the same protein again, so the same antigen, and so what your body is reacting to isn't necessarily coronavirus, but what your body is reacting to are the spike proteins, right? So your body is reacting to those spike proteins. It's like, oh wow, these things are here. Oh, by the way, like we know exactly what to produce. We can skip the whole like process of randomizing stuff, right? So imagine you have a certain percent chance of, and but the thing is, this is how your body treats any sort of virus. This is how your body treats any sort of illness, right? Not just COVID, right? This is how every single vaccine works, right? Sure, for the day or two, right? Or for the first couple of hours before your body is able to like start producing the antibodies in earnest, you might have the same sort of like transmissibility as somebody who's doing that process naturally. The difference here being is that if you're vaccinated, this process, right, because your body has already encountered the spike protein, this process takes only about a day or two, whereas if you're unvaccinated, it could take up to a week or more. So what we're talking about is like, for example, every day you have a percent chance of spreading it to one person or to two people or to three people, right? If you have like one day of that percent chance versus 7 days of that percent chance, that's a massive, massive difference when it comes to stuff like this. And one of the other goals, so like a secondary goal when it comes to herd immunity, right, is to reduce what's called the R factor, which is the transmission of the virus, which is the average amount of, people that you transmit the virus to, like on a daily basis, down to like below one, right? So if it's below one, that means for every one person that gets infected, they infect less than one person, which means it's going to go down considerably. If it's something like Delta variant, which is something like 6, which means your average unvaccinated person will infect 6 other people on by the time that they're done with the illness, right? Like that's how virulent the disease is. And, and this isn't even accounting for like stuff like if your body is fighting the virus early, then you will have like less viral loads just to begin with over the entire piece of time. That's number one. And number two, when you do get the virus, if you ever like contract the virus, you will have like a massively reduced amount of symptoms, massively reduced amount of everything. And so we can go over some of the numbers that we have. So like some of the numbers, for example, from Health Canada, from the health of the of the patient, which is like kind of the second part what I wanted to get into. The first part I wanted to get into, like I'm sorry if I'm being a bit disorganized, but like there's kind of two parts of my argument. The first part is like let's exclude the 17 to 12 to 17 males, right? Let's talk about for everybody else. And then let's talk about the 12 to 17 males for which I have some objections as to the health whatever, right? So that's kind of like the thing. So like even if like there's this in theory for like a day or two you might be like quote unquote as transmissible, you're nowhere near as transmissible for nowhere near as amount of time, and so your chance of actually spreading it to somebody else is massively reduced because your body is already able to go into overdrive to produce the correct antibody instead of attempting like you know at random. Like this is kind of why some people get lucky and they don't get a lot of symptoms because their body kind of chances upon the correct antibodies right away, whereas for other people it takes them a bit longer, right? So that's kind of like the immune system kind of like encountering something new, going at random, and so you can basically eliminate the symptoms by introducing a sort of vaccine. mRNA vaccines are actually like a massive like a massively like powerful technology that will probably allow us to fight off a lot of other diseases because it kind of skips a lot of the steps that are involved in producing vaccines, and it allows basically um, the body to react directly to the thing that it will react to anyway. So so yeah.
So pretty much all of what you said, right? I mean, this is what and how it should work in theory, but we've seen that this has just simply not been true in practice. And it's come out, there's studies from Israel that said that natural immunity can be up to 27 times more effective than this vaccine immunity because it is not producing the antibodies like you're saying. The natural immunity is producing up to 27 times more antibodies and giving people better protection. And the viral load, like you claimed that the viral load is actually smaller within vaccinated people. It's not. They've come out and noticed that it's the exact same viral load. These people are just as transmissible as the unvaccinated. And the fact is the results are showing themselves. I mean, you have a country like Israel that is 85% of the adult population is double vaccinated, 66% is triple vaccinated, and you have absolutely no stop to the transmission of the disease. The disease keeps transmitting. They have some of the highest numbers they've had in the past 2 years, just in the past month. They've been reaching new highs every single week, even though their numbers for vaccination are increasing. There's no correlation between the amount of people vaccinated and a reduction of the spread of the virus. And this is backed up by studies that are saying that the immunity provided by the vaccine is just simply not there, and the natural immunity is much more robust. So I don't know. Like I said, this is what the media is saying, right? They're telling you all of these things, and this is how it should work. But the proof is in the pudding. This is not how it is working. We cannot see these robust results from the vaccine like that they are claiming. That's, I guess, my response to that. I don't think that any of that is true. I mean, it's a plausible theory, and maybe once they work out the kinks in this vaccine, mRNA technology will be highly successful. But right now, it is simply not.
I mean, I still think that like even if like I mean I'm not like opposed to the fact that like perhaps natural immunity is like stronger, but like getting COVID if you're vaccinated, right, versus getting COVID if you're not vaccinated is a massive difference both in the amount of time you are going to be sick, right, and the severity of the illness when you do get it. Like it's just I mean that's borne out by the facts, right?
There's
Like if
no
you
data to back that up, though. The Massachusetts study had the same amount of people contracting the virus, right? You had 75% of the people vaccinated got the virus, 25% were unvaccinated, and about 80% of the people in the hospital were vaccinated, and 20% of the people in the hospital were unvaccinated. There's really no difference in the amount of severity of the symptoms. There's no difference in the amount of viral load. The studies just don't agree with you.
all right, so let's just take a little detour, like if we're looking at numbers and stuff, to the okay, please. Okay, good. All right, okay. To the Health Canada epidemiological study, right? So the amount of cases today, right, is 4,141 cases for a total of 2 million cases, which means a 3.7 positive test rate for today. That's, great. I think, actually, no, I'll go to Quebec because I think Quebec publishes vaccine versus unvaccinated. All right. There we go. There we go.
All right. Well, you look that up. I'm gonna fill some dead air and
All right,
say,
sure.
oh, yeah. Well, yeah, let me know when you're ready.
All right,
Uh,
sure.
but I'll just say, and one more thing regarding the efficacy of this vaccine. Once again, another study coming out of the UK. So the UK government health system. This is a study that looked specifically at the Delta variant and said that they had 250,000 cases of unvaccinated Delta and 85,000 cases of vaccinated Delta. So, based on those numbers, it would lead you to believe that the unvaccinated are at higher risk of contracting the disease. But now we have Delta deaths from the unvaccinated were only 722, while vaccinated were 1,613. So you have a significantly higher death rate in this study of the group in this study than you have from the unvaccinated. And there really isn't any way you can justify that this vaccine is providing you with any kind of serious protection. You see, people who have the vaccine are still ending up in the hospital. They are still dying. Pretty much everything that they said about it is false. And they keep
Okay.
saying, yes.
The issue with doing something like that is saying, oh, you still have, for example, breakthrough cases that get into the hospital, right? Is that for your average person that has a breakthrough case, the severity is not only much lower than somebody who is unvaccinated, but like what like you have an already pre-built immune response that's ready to go in most people, right? Sometimes the vaccine doesn't take. I think like the efficacy is something like 95%. What was the initial studies that got these vaccines approval had a 95% of like generating immune response after 2 doses, like between 90 and 95%. I think on the ground it was something like 89%, which is still a very high rate of, for example, these are the people, right? So there's a 10% of people that are going to be vaccinated, but unfortunately won't develop the immune response, just like it is in like for a lot of, vaccines. Not every vaccine's 100% because everybody's immune system is different for whatever reason. Sometimes people don't develop the enough memory cells to starve off the disease. Now, yeah, so I'm trying to get the because I believe there was they were um yeah, so there's a seminal work for those two things. Um I'm trying to get the data from Quebec when it comes to vaccinated versus unvaccinated people and like the percentage of the population, but like for I know for a large portion of it, at the very least the like what they're calling the fourth wave, uh, almost all the hospitalizations. There was like only a handful of hospitalizations compared to like everyone else. Quebec in Canada, we have something like 80%, 75% I think, or like 80% or something like that of the eligible population that's vaccinated. So that's around 70% of the total population. And every day when you had hospitalizations or new cases, you could count on your fingers the amount of people that were vaccinated, that were double vaccinated, whereas the amount of people who weren't, uh, was much higher. So out of like maybe a cohort of 30, you would only get one person that was vaccinated that got into hospital, even though the unvaccinated in Quebec, right? I'm not talking about whatever in Quebec, where we have two vaccines that we use here in Canada, which is the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. Um, that's a ratio of a fairly good ratio of efficacy when it comes to especially when you consider the fact that the unvaccinated population is only about like 10 to 15%. So you have like those statistics that are very like at the very least somewhat like very robust. I'm trying to get the exact numbers. I can get you, but like I'm almost certain that um the Quebec report, so these vaccines do produce a decent amount of protection for the individual. It's very unfortunate. Like it really is, like I wouldn't say sorry. Unfortunate is the wrong word, right? It's a tragedy when somebody gets the illness, gets severely ill, and dies. Especially, person vaccinated or not, it's a tragedy when that happens. But the data shows, right, especially when you look at on the ground in these jurisdictions that are heavily vaccinated, that the rate of death. So if you look up coronavirus, let's look up the Israeli numbers when they started doing all this. So yeah, no, like their cases are way down right now, right? So since the beginning of July, they've had like 4 waves, and now their cases are way down, right? So it's not a growing. Their cases aren't growing. Their cases are going down every day. So they had 14th of September, they had a case average of 10,000. Now they have a case average of about 1,000, right? So, like you say that their cases are growing. That's, evidently not true at the moment. All right. Uh, right. There's also an issue, right? Okay, so that's my first point. Do you have any contentions with that first point?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
we could say that the highest figure, right, in the past uh, few months. So at the end of August, right, they were hitting at 64,000 people, right, testing positive. So that's a 6.31% positivity rate, and that was when they were 84% double vaccinated and
mhm.
starting to roll out the triple vaccinations. So once again, we don't really see any large correlation between uh, the amount of people vaccinated and a reduction in positive testing numbers. And we can see
Okay.
that this
All right.
stuff.
So here's the issue that I'm having. So when you're talking about, positive testing numbers, right? Um, the criteria for a positive test, right, is that there's part of you go to a testing site for whatever reason because somebody has exposure, or because you go to travel or whatever, right? Or it's something routine that you do. You go to the clinic, the nurse takes out a little pokey stick, shoves it up your nose, tickles your brain a bit. Not actually your brain, but like you know what I mean. Like if you ever gotten COVID tested, you know exactly what I mean by like when I say they tickle your brain a bit. And pulls it out and does a PCR test or a PCR or an antigen test on you, and gives you either a positive or a negative result. That tells you nothing about how severe the illness is. It tells you nothing about like what kind of symptoms you're having. If you're having no symptoms, if you're actually contagious, if there's enough viral load to spread the disease. I think a common misconception that people have is that a vaccine is a sort of like shield, right? That just bounces off the disease. Any vaccine doesn't do anything to prevent the disease to get into your system. What vaccines do is it gives your immune system the tools to whack that disease before it can do anything, essentially, right? So somebody that gets coronavirus, 95% of those cases or more of like a lot of them are either mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic. For example, my father, we had to get tested in order to travel. We wanted to travel to the States. Unfortunately, he tested positive, and and he had to stay home. But him being double vaccinated had absolutely no symptoms whatsoever, and simply had to do a 14-day quarantine, a self-isolation thing, out of out of I wouldn't say out of carefulness, right? But himself felt no symptoms, no nothing. And this is a person that you would, say has, quite a few comorbidities, especially in the in a lot of categories. And so when it comes down to like your chance of getting an actual bad effect, the length of time for which the symptoms persist, and the overall um, infectivity of the disease massively decreases just on those factors alone, right? So if you're more symptomatic, you spread it more, right? Because there's more virus in your system. That's why you're more symptomatic. And so you're expelling more virus. You're sick for longer, right? If you're sick for longer, then you spread the virus for longer, right? For example, say you have a 1% chance every single day of spreading the virus if you have it, right? If you're sick for one day, you only have 1% chance to spread anything. The chance of that becoming like a rampant infection, very, 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 very low. Um, versus 7 days, where each person that gets it have a 7% if it's an entire week versus like 1 or 2 days, right? That's also a massive decrease of how long you are transmissible for, and these are effects that we see with the vaccine, right? And so if you want to compare, for example, a lightly symptomatic person that has contracted like a breakthrough case after they got the vaccine, or somebody that has a mild case but hasn't been vaccinated, it's likely that you'll find similar numbers for like viral load because the symptom load is very, very similar. But if you kind of consider all the other factors when it comes to the length of time that somebody is sick, and the severity of the illness, the transmissibility of like your average person who does get a coronavirus is massively reduced when you do get the vaccine. So it does contribute to that, well, that herd immunity that is going to protect the more vulnerable members of the society from getting vaccinated. And it will also, if you are unfortunate enough to catch the Delta variant or any other variant of the disease, have the vaccination immunity plus the vaccine immunity, right? So there's plus the natural, like the virus, you fought off the actual virus immunity. And so that's kind of those two things in concert is like even stronger than just one or the other. There's a few other data, and like this is data when I'm talking about like the 95% of effectiveness results. I'm taking it from the British Columbia Center for Disease Control. So I don't know. I'm going to post this in your post this here. I don't know if that's there. So this is from the BCCDC, right? The British Columbia Center for Disease Control kind of shows this effectiveness. It has a 95% of effectiveness of like protecting you against hospitalization compared to like somebody that's unvaccinated. So if your chance of getting hospitalized is like 10% normally, reduce that to 0.5% if you're vaccinated. Like that is a massive effect for like anybody's health. It's a massive boost for your immune system. Like it's basically like I heard somebody else say this, but it's basically a free workout for your immune system, and it lets your immune system bypass the days and days and days it takes to build up that immunity. Now, if you want to speculate as to why it seems that perhaps maybe it's less effective than natural immunity, we can speculate about that later. But so far, that's kind of like I think we can save that for later, and instead kind of focus on like my belief, right? Kind of based on the evidence, based on the data, is that the vaccine protects you from having serious symptoms, which is essentially what people care about, right? If it's a 95% reduction, it reduces the time that you're sick, and it reduces the like your overall infectivity, like as an average case of COVID, right? Across all cases. Essentially by reducing the symptomaticity of people. And so that's kind of my take from there. I forget what the second part, right? The second part was just going on about how they classify positive cases and how that doesn't actually tell the whole story. I have to like yell at, well, I wouldn't say yell, but yell on the internet against COVID doomers here in Canada that are yelling about like the COVID load, the COVID load, the COVID load. When I'm looking at, well, the actual like if you're vaccinated, you don't actually have like a lot here, period, because your chances of going into hospital, they were if they were low before because you're in that age category with a strong immune system, they're basically zero now. Like you don't have to like stay huddled up in your home if you get vaccinated. Like I don't agree with like anybody that's saying that. Like that those people are, I'd say, out of their minds, right? Like these COVID doomers that say they want forever lockdowns because I don't know. So
Uh,
I
well, so what I think this is going to be a very hard impasse to get through because it seems like you have data that supports your view. I have data that supports my view, and we really have no way of telling, what is the actual truth here. Because once again, I have studies that show the vaccine is not preventing any serious symptoms. You have studies that show that it does. So
Right.
if
Okay.
we
So,
have,
so the issue. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Like the issue, right, is um, what is defined by prevent, right? Serious symptoms, because preventing serious symptoms is also like always compared to something else, right? So, if your definition of prevent is you will never get a serious symptom ever, then, well, obviously, then I'm wrong, right? Because right? Like, because you can get serious symptoms. What I'm saying is that compared to like an average person that's unvaccinated that's going to get COVID, there's like a massive reduction in your chance of like having those serious symptoms, of having hospitalizations, of having being placed in the ICU, compared to somebody that isn't um that's not vaccinated, right? It's this comparative I wouldn't say comparative approach, right? But this is true for effectively most, if not all treatments, right? Unfortunately, there are some people that don't take to the treatment, so they don't like their immune systems don't react well um to the treatment, right? Their bodies don't react well to the treatment. But for your average person that's going to take the vaccine, there will be a massive reduction in like the chance that they will get any sort of reaction, any sort of hospitalization, any sort of anything if they do get the virus. Right? That's my position. Right? So I don't know if the studies like that you're like, so you have to kind of look at the definition of like how those people determined who like what it means to get a serious effect, right? Or what a serious effect even is.
well, what is the most
Or what
serious
is
side effect possible?
I mean,
I would say
I guess the
dying.
most, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah.
So I have a study that shows that people who are vaccinated in the UK are dying at a several times higher rate than people who are vaccinated. And this is a pretty recent study. And
Is it a study or is it a preprint?
uh,
Because for preprint, it's less than worthless.
well, it's data that is,
I'm just saying that in general because preprints have been like the bane of like ever since COVID started. Preprints, like if you look at any of the bad ideas that have come out about COVID, it's all preprints. Uh, it's entirely preprints. Preprint culture is toxic. It's cancerous, and shouldn't be trusted at all. If you see something that is in a um that's in a preprint journal, I don't touch those, right? Because so the difference between a preprint and an actual study is that a preprint is a publication of a study before it's actually been peer reviewed. So yeah,
so
that's kind of
so
so
looking at
that
it,
so
it's not even a study. It's raw data from the
yeah so
government.
yeah so it's a briefing. Like it's not even like an actual methodology of how
Well, they just have the raw
they
numbers. They have the raw numbers of the people who are vaccinated, how many of them died, and the people who are unvaccinated, and how many of them died. And the numbers are quite alarming. So, if you go to page, I believe it's, I mean, if you really want to look at it, right? There's a table. I believe it's page 61. So you have Delta cases sitting at about, for the unvaccinated, you're sitting at
2,000,
250,000 for the
right?
vaccinated, 85,000 for the vaccinated, and yet
Right.
you have 722 deaths for the unvaccinated and 1,613 deaths for the vaccinated. So this is just raw numbers. They can't really mess with this in any way, and it's coming from the government. So we would hope that they're not doctoring the data. And how do we explain this? How do we explain this, this many more
Well,
people dying?
I don't know. If you look at the data when it comes to the was it greater than 14 days past dose? So you said like there was only 712 people. Like there was only, you know, not a lot of people whatsoever. Um, there's like 712 versus 4,000, right? Under 50 is where you get, the 4,000 versus 1,000. But, you know, if you look at the amount of people in those age categories that are vaccinated, I think it'll show you a very, very different picture. So like like this kind of shows the inverse of what you're saying. Like if it's like under 50, there's like what, 712 versus 4,500. So if the government, the first thing they did is, and what's this from February, 1st of February? This is from February of this year. Um, you know, like, uh, I mean, there's no like the problem with like a lot of like pure data is that you can't really do a lot of like if you try to make a lot of inferences from data, right? Without any sort of, underlying background in any sort of context or whatever, right? Uh, it's likely that you can make bad conclusions, right? So there are a few ways to interpret data. And one of the things that studies do, or that studies are supposed to do, right? If they're peer reviewed, is they don't just look at data, they don't just present raw data. They look at the data and they do analysis on the data. They do analysis on the relevant causal factors, the causal links, and draw some sort of conclusions based on that. If you're trying to, I wouldn't say draw the people who aren't like trained to draw conclusions from data are very likely to draw bad conclusions. So you can have two studies, right? One that ends up like and can have wildly different conclusions, but one of them effectively, cherry picks their own data and like all this other stuff, and the other one actually goes through rigorous peer review process. I would trust the one that went through the rigorous peer review process over the preprint that kind of just like is the person that's waving their fingers and like trying to make a sensationalist claim without like doing a lot of data analysis. This is one of the dangers of preprints is that you often have data that's not like peer reviewed, where like the methodology isn't looked at, very well. So when you look at, so if you look at, so the interesting thing about this study is that like it doesn't mesh well with your claim that it's more dangerous, like for people that are over the age of like, sorry, under like was 12 to 12, 17, which is the under 50 category. And when you look at the data and it segregates the data into like under 50 and over 50, what it looks like, if you take your thing, is that all of this are occurring in the for the unvaccinated population. The deaths are all occurring in the under 50 category, and for the vaccinated population, all the deaths are occurring in the over 50 category. And so when you kind of have something like that, it's probably best to wait for like an actual study or like an actual data analysis that's based on causal factors to draw any sort of like robust conclusions, because it kind of doesn't jive well with the rest of your argument that you're making about like younger people on the vaccine, because it looks like it's fairly effective. I can take that position very easily with this exact same data, which is why like it's probably better to wait for somebody to do like an actual proper data analysis and like an actual study than like try to draw our conclusions on our own based on like something like that. Um, there's like sifting it. Like we can trade studies all we want, but like I think this is like for me, like is like for and like so my the thing I wanted to go on was like let's talk about um you know everybody except for males 12 to 17 and then males 12 to 17. And so like my general thing, right, is that technology works and that's about it. There's decent data to suggest that it vastly reduces the amount of actual cases that happen, and the severity of those cases when they do occur. Uh, and if you find data that seems kind of contradictory like this, um, it's probably, and especially if it's like if you're looking at like, well, over 50 is a very, very gory, like that's not very useful, I'd say, to draw these kinds of conclusions. And especially if you look at you know, yeah, so if you look at the over 50 numbers in this study, right? So just from this UK study, you have 71,000 over 50. So it says over or equal to 50 versus 8,000 unvaccinated. And when you look at like over 50, so that is you know, what's it called? You have let's just do a quick ratio of it's about 9 times, I think, just doing mental math. So 8 and 72 divided by 8.5. It's about, 11 times. Right? So 11 times more vaccinated than unvaccinated in the over 50 range. But about 4 times as many deaths. So 10 versus 4. Let's just, 10, 10 divided by 4, right? It reduces the chance of death by at least 2.5 times in the over 50 category. Like you're looking at, so you went all cases, but if you segregate it into like these two categories where you have a data that's being weighted massively, and then if you look at the under 50 category, even from this data that you have presented to me, right? Let's just do the ratio again. So 248 divided by 85, that's about 2.9 times more unvaccinated. And you have that's for 4517 divided by 721, and you have 6.26 times more unvaccinated that are dying compared to only about 3 times as many, like population wise, that are unvaccinated that are presenting. So even there, you see that like your chance of getting like a severe effect in both categories, in both the over 50 and the under 50, are reduced by about, two and a half, like, and I might be doing, but like there is seems to be, even in this data, there is that reduction in lethality of a case of coronavirus.
So
And it doesn't. So like I just went over the same data that you sent me. And it does that data like this is why I'm saying that like just looking at all cases is a bit, I would say doesn't tell the whole picture. But if you look at both categories that they presented, the data that for the vaccinated, because of a massive overrepresentation of the over 50 that's vaccinated, but if you compare the vaccinated to the unvaccinated, it's still a massively lower percent chance in both categories.
well, I just double checked your math on there, and it still seems like there's about 2 times chance of a person over 50 dying than a person uh, than a unvaccinated person over 50 dying. Once again, just according to this raw data. But
Right.
either way, let's take a
So
step
so
back.
so there are right. So there are nine. So there are like was it 10.8 times as many vaccinated, but only about um I forget what was the number. What was it? So let's just do the ratio, right? So how many more people? So vaccinated, 71,991 divided by 8,551, right? 8.4 times, right? So there are
Why are you
8.4,
dividing by that number?
like it's the amount, like it's so there for every unvaccinated person over the age of 50, there
Right.
are 8.4, right? Like that's the number I was doing,
Oh, okay.
right? There are 8.4 people that are vaccinated for every unvaccinated person. Now
Okay.
let's look at your death statistic, like the death statistics that were provided, right?
Right.
It's 3,913 divided by 1,786. That's 2.19. So for every unvaccinated person that's dead, it's 2.1 vaccinated people that died. So if you look at like the reduction in the ratio there, right? It's massive, right? It's massive. Even if you so and that's 2.19. Let's look at the raw numbers. So there's 8,551 unvaccinated people that present to the hospital over the age of 50. Divide that by the amount of people that died. It's 1,786. That's actually I should probably do the opposite of that. Like sorry, I'll do the 1,786 divided by the 8,551. That's that's 20.8%
So that's so
chance of
much more.
death.
All you have to do is you do.
That's a 20.8% chance of a fatality, right? And let's compare like with like. So there are 3,913 fatalities over the age of 50 that are vaccinated divided by the 1,007 so sorry 71,991, and that's a 5% chance of fatality. So you already see a reduction of like the fatality from about 20.8% to 5% in the category of the over 50s that are driving these statistics.
Uh, okay, I guess that is. Where are we? Sorry, I'm just doing my own corroboration. What? So yeah, that's not the. I don't know which one of us is doing our math wrong, but so I'm getting 71,199
Right? So
divided by the fifth.
991.
What?
71,991.
Yes, divided by 1,565 gives you a 45% chance of death versus 8,551 divided by 590 gives you a 14.5% chance of death. So it's about 3 times higher rate of death for the vaccinated than the unvaccinated,
Makes
just
sense.
according to this data set for people above 50. And I don't really want to get into this numbers back and forth.
Anyways,
Ultimately,
yeah.
this is my point, is I look at this and I find it to be kind of alarming. Now you're saying that I should wait around for a person who has the credentials to interpret this data for me, and in the meantime I should go ahead and get vaccinated and hope that my worst fears are not realized.
I mean, if you're like, if you look at the, just look at the vaccination data, right? There's only a few like this idea like that somebody's immune system suddenly gets weaker if they get the vaccine is um not believable to say the least.
Well, it's the
Especially
belief
like what
that
was it?
we have studies coming out, right, that natural immunity is 27 times better at preventing the
No,
disease.
20% isn't 20. Like I don't know how you say 27 times better. And
This is a separate study. This is a study from Israel that says that natural immunity is up to 27 times better at preventing the coronavirus, right, preventing serious symptoms, and studies are saying this, right? And so the difference is you have other data that's saying that you cannot have vaccine immunity and natural immunity. So it makes sense that if we just take this to its logical conclusion, right, we're going to see more deaths among the vaccinated than among the unvaccinated if it's true that natural immunity gives you a better immunity than vaccine immunity, and that having the vaccine removes your natural immunity so that you cannot have both.
No, no, that's not how the immune system works. So when people talk about natural immunity being stronger, that is somebody who has contracted COVID, right, and has gone through the disease, they now have what's called a natural immunity, right, compared to a vaccine immunity, which is the same thing, except it's not, through the same vector, right? It's not like you don't have, like, this is what I tried to explain at the beginning, right? Is like your body, if you're not vaccinated, number one, or you haven't had the disease, right, doesn't have any immunity, right? Your immune system, when it first encounters the coronavirus virus, right? Or the spike, so sorry, not the virus itself, but like the spike proteins of the virus, recognizes it as a foreign protein that it must destroy, right? And then kind of goes into overdrive to try to destroy the virus and try to produce antibodies to rip apart the virus by tugging at the proteins, right? Uh, like your body develops, I mean, an immunity through contact with either the virus itself or with a vaccine. Now, the data from Israel, and there have been some like, um, I wouldn't, there have been some like challenges to that conclusion, but I'm personally not challenging it. That the natural immunity, if you come into contact with the virus itself, it does give you a slightly stronger like immune response, right? Which means that like what I'm guessing that means is that your body has either more of the antibodies or there's more of a chance of like enough memory cells to remain after fighting it, because if the vaccine is too weak, right, and your immune system gets rid of it too quickly, right, then your immune system won't develop the immunity, right? So, but if it's the actual virus, your body definitely will develop some sort of immunity. That's just not really avoidable. Well, one way or the other, you're going to be immune to it. You're not going to get it again. Um, you'll either have an immunity or you will have a different type of immunity. You will be in a place where there is no sickness. Um, so, um, that's kind of the two things that's going to happen if you. Uh, and so your body then develops the immunity. So the immunity doesn't go away if you get a vaccine. That's not like a difference from a natural immunity. It's just a vaccine-based immunity, right? Like it doesn't get removed. Like your natural immunity doesn't get removed if you get the vaccine. What happens is your body, if you already have a natural immunity and you get vaccinated, then your body's just going to get rid of the proteins almost immediately. Like it just won't be an issue, right? You'll just produce the antibodies immediately, and then your body's gonna kill the virus. Like, sorry, the I wouldn't. Actually, there's nothing to kill really. They'll just absorb the proteins into amino acids and then like try to integrate them into your body. Um, so, um, but yeah, like you don't lose immunity. Like that's not how the immune system works. The the spike proteins don't get in. They don't destroy your leukocytes. They just kind of float around. Worst case scenario, they get absorbed into the cells and decomposed and repurposed into different proteins. Um, like so this idea. So when it comes to doing science, right, and when it comes to coming to like conclusions, right, from correlation. So you look at something, when somebody says like correlation doesn't imply causation, right? But it could be a causation, and it could be a causation if you can produce a a mechanism by which those two things are connected, right?
Right.
So if there's a mechanism that connects those two things, right? Correlation doesn't imply causation, but it could be indicative of one, and it could be indicative of one if there's some sort of plausible mechanism by which the those two effects might be linked, right? I simply don't see any sort of plausible link as to if you have a natural immunity. So if you've already encountered the virus and then your body encounters more of the spike proteins, that somehow all of the antibody producing cells will just shut down and not respond to the protein ever again. That seems just very contradictory to like if that were the case, then basically vaccines would be like a one-off thing, right? Like it would just be like, oh, you get to fight the disease one more time, and then they're done forever, right? That just seems to not be the case at all. That's not how the immune system works. There's like no mechanism there for that to happen. Um, and so it's just uh very difficult for me to kind of get onto that, that side of the aisle. Like I understand, right, if people are like worried and afraid, right? Like that's a very natural human emotion to feel. But what I'm trying to say is that like most of the data presented, the data like that's affecting like look at places, like Canada, right? Your chance of getting hospitalized, your chance of getting like into an ICU bed, it's like vastly reduced. And this is just data from the hospitals, right? So Um, and like the ones that we use here are like the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. We used like for like a month or two, we had like AstraZeneca on the market. We pulled it because um, that vaccine had issues. But we also did a very interesting thing that if like we tried mixing vaccines, and effectively it's almost the same thing because the technology is the technology, right? Um, it's basically the same technology, but like repackaged under a different label. So like mixing vaccines is fine too, even if the government doesn't like it very much. Um, so at least that's what the data from Canada says. And so if you look at our data, it seems fine. So anyway, I guess I can like close off the first section about everyone else. What I'm interested in looking at, right, is males between the age of 12 to 17 and stuff like myocarditis, right? I think you also came like ready to talk about that a bit, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, if anybody doesn't know, there's been a bevy of new studies indicating that there might be a small chance of like an increased risk of getting myocarditis for males 18 to 29, I believe. Um, you know, and this is included in I'm not gonna sit here and saying that this risk I wouldn't say doesn't happen. It's like they've correlated this with the vaccine, and there is some sort of like mechanism behind like you could probably possibly like draw a connection between like something in the immune response and then that affecting something we know within the heart. And so the actual like for me, what you have to look at here, right, is that it's very, very difficult to actually look at a lot of like data and stuff about this because a lot of like the vaccine data, a lot of this other data isn't like sectioned off by age categories, right? Like you don't really have like a report of like you kind of have a report of you have a report of like how many doses, but you don't really have a lot of like data dividing it between um well actually you do actually you do by age group, um adverse effects by age group, but you don't have serious adverse effects by age group. Um, since that. But let's just kind of go off the data. If we look at the 18 to 29-year-old males, and this is from the Health Canada numbers, um, there have been uh, just under 2,000 um, adverse effects from the vaccine from January 1st, 2021 up until October 1st, 2021. There have been a total of 4,000, like 500, or 4,000, I'll get the number right now, 4,675 serious adverse effects, which are adverse effects that lead to hospitalization. And now these adverse effects, they include a lot of things. They also include all the myocarditis cases. So out of the 4,675, serious cases, and there have been 17,000 total cases. Out of the 17,000 total cases of an adverse effect, which is like a headache or whatever, right? There have been 4,000 serious, 2,000 total adverse effects were felt by uh, people 18 to 29. Um, let's assume, right, age group and sex, they also have those numbers. And most of those adverse effects were felt by women, right? So only about
I thought
just
myocarditis
over
was more
600,
prevalent in men.
608, right? So there have been six in Canada, right? There have been 608 total adverse event reports, right? In Canada for males 18 to 29. Um, let's assume all of them were serious, right? Let's assume every single one of those events is serious. And let's add the 12 to 17 males just for good measure. That's another 239 total adverse event cases. Let's assume that they are all serious, right? Let's assume that they all, do this thing. So let's just do some quick numbers. That's 209 plus 608. Those 847 adverse events since the beginning of the year. Serious adverse events. Let's look at a few other numbers, right? Vaccination numbers. Yeah, vaccines and immunization.
And just to be clear, you're still talking about
I'm
all.
t-
You're talking about all adverse effects over the entire age
yeah,
range of
and
12 to
yeah,
28. You said.
yeah, 12 to 29.
Okay.
There have been 800 in Canada, 800 or so in Canada for males. Let's assume, and this is total adverse events, but let's assume they're all serious. So they all include myocarditis and serious hospitalization. Let's assume that for the sake of argument. The cumulative number of people vaccinated in those two age categories is 4,302,642 for the 18 to 29s and 1,856,000 76. So you would get a total population of about 6,158,118 vaccinated. Now let's take half of that because that's total population. Let's assume half of them are male. It's roughly the same. Roughly 6,158,118 because unfortunately, I can't find the um because it's roughly like it's 78 per 77 female, 74 male, but they don't like break it down by age, like age and sex, right? About how many people got vaccinated. So let's just say so it's about 3,079,000, right? 3.1 million. Let's just round it up to 3,100,000, right? Of those 3,100,000 people, 847 had serious effects since the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
The daily new cases in Canada is 4,138. The total amount of new deaths is about 45 per day. Over, the past, wow, and so it's been about 45, 56, average of 45 since the 20th of September, which is about 20 days ago. this is enough like people that have, succumbed to this disease compared to like serious effects to last a very, very long time. If you count the cumulative amount of like COVID deaths that have happened in Canada, total, and you assume that they all happen within this specific range to this specific group, which we all know isn't true, right? If we, do a lot of assumptions that inflate the amount of like casualties that happen in the 18 to 27 age group, these vaccines have to literally do absolutely nothing in order for, the risks to even equate. If the vaccines do literally anything, if they reduce the chance by like 20 to 50%, right? Already this risk of like adverse effects versus like your extra like additional risk of getting the virus and dying, that already is um is worth getting the vaccine for this population. And that's doing all these assumptions that inflate the incidence of these these adverse effects for this age group, versus the entirety of the population. Now, what I've seen for the myocarditis stuff is that it's essentially a temporary situation, and that for
Myocarditis
the
is not
vast
temporary,
majority,
it's a permanent. It stays with you for your life and
or
has a
okay,
66% 5-year mortality rate. So as soon as you get a myocarditis diagnosis, there's a
no, no,
66%
no.
chance you're dead in 5 years.
No, no. So, okay, so myocarditis, there's a slight inflammation of, uh, you know, of a lot of this. This doesn't like when it comes to COVID myocarditis. Um, there's methods. So the results is amongst like let's just go to the Israel study. 21 received an alternative diagnosis of the remaining, 283 cases. Right. So 142 did after. And there's like a largest difference, which is a difference of a grand total, right? So this the confidence interval, right, is this one 1.5. It's about like to about 13, right? Although low, right, increased after the receipt of virus and to males, right? So that's kind of okay. That's all this said. This doesn't say anything about the for most people that had this myocarditis diagnosis after the vaccine, after about a follow-up 5 months later, most if not all the symptoms had been gone, right? So there's some evidence, right, that there's this temporary period of time where certain parts of your body might get inflamed after you get the vaccine, right? There's certain effects that might happen to your body, to like your heart muscles, to whatever, after you get the vaccine. It's still lower though than the chance of getting myocarditis from COVID-19, which is really what we should be comparing this to, right? So this isn't really a comparison of just the vaccine in a vacuum. This is a comparison of like these two scenarios of you either getting COVID, and with the transmissibility of the Delta variant, you will get COVID, or you getting the vaccine. And so, like on these two areas, both like there's evidence that the symptoms go away after about 5 months, and that like when it comes to the myocarditis symptoms that occur after the certain types of mRNA vaccines, it seems to go away after like after a few months, and that it's not permanent, and that most people have absolutely no like. So there is like the permanent like the chronic myocarditis, and then there's like symptomatic, like so there's like the acute versions. Um, so there's that. I did the numbers like better before, but here we go. Researchers find a higher average in men. Uh, you know, out of 2.5 million, right? So yeah.
All right, so here's what I have.
Yeah,
Okay,
so yeah, so here we go. the highest incidence of risk. Yeah, but when the patients were examined a few weeks later, all five, for those whose results were available, appear to have fully recovered. So this data is based on, I wouldn't say this data, but like out of a bevy of patients, all of the individual patients that have actually like been there, like after a few weeks, like a few weeks to a few months after, they fully recovered from the condition, and most, if not all, the condition is actually mild. So, like in every disease, there's like a range of like severe versus a mild version of the condition, right? Because myocarditis isn't really a disease, because technically a disease is if something invades you. This isn't like something invading you; it's part of your body not working. Um, the number of people who have this condition long term seems to be going down. These people seem to have recovered, shown no symptoms of myocarditis, and the ones that did get myocarditis after the dose of the mRNA COVID vaccine simply didn't have like had effectively just a mild version of the disease. And if you look at that versus the chances of myocarditis happening from COVID itself, the myocarditis in COVID, and I don't have the data in front of me, but right now what I'm willing to do is bet that the chance of that is much, much higher. So
Uh,
just let me comb through the data, please. All right, so you wanted to go?
uh, yeah. So I have this study, not yet peer reviewed, but University of California.
No, then it's worthless. It's worthless.
Okay, so then let's just
So that's actually what's
so
called
then
a
let's all
preprint.
just shoot ourselves up with
Preprints are worthless.
vaccines and not look at
Preprints
any
are worthless.
data. And
No, no,
do
no,
you
no,
realize
no,
how ridiculous this is?
no, no, no.
You're trying
No,
to
no.
get people
I'm
to
actually no, no.
inject a foreign substance into their body and then saying it's not even worth looking at something that might possibly be a negative effect.
Um, it's no. I'm saying preprints are worthless. Actually, they're less than worthless.
Well, apparently the
Um,
FDA doesn't think that they're worthless because the FDA did not approve booster shots in America. They only
all
approved
right,
them
yeah. I'm
for
not
people.
advocating for booster shots, so you're arguing against somebody that's not advocating for that,
Okay, well
right?
then.
When I'm talking about preprints, so a preprint, right, is a non-peer-reviewed study. So the peer review process is actually incredibly important in the scientific community, because it helps weed out like the good analysis and the good data and the good methodology, and the from like the nonsense. So once again, like you can have somebody that does a study where the person basically is just like, yeah, I'm just going to cherry pick all the stuff. I'm going to delete, like, there's a bunch of data points that I have, but in order to make my conclusion, I'm going to delete them. If that person tries to publish it in a respectable journal, the peer review process will reject it, right? So before anything is peer reviewed, there's always like these little journals that publish like articles that are in the process of being peer reviews. Those are called preprints. So if you've ever encountered like all these claims online, like when the media is like, oh, this thing like cures cancer, or oh, this thing causes cancer, or oh, this thing is like going to kill you, or this other thing, like when you have like these sensationalist things in the media about like these scientific studies that have been allegedly conducted, almost every single one of them to the T is a preprint, and that like after it's gotten peer reviewed has basically been thrown out for like being either cherry picking their data or doing some other thing or doing some other thing. Like all of them like have basically like, because a lot of people have realized that like they can make a lot of money by doing bad studies, putting them in preprint journals, knowing that it's going to like get rid of it, but they'll get a lot of media attention and they'll be able to talk about their stuff. Preprint journals, preprints are absolutely worthless. I'm not saying that you shouldn't like that. There's no chance if that study like goes through the peer review process and comes out of the other end, with this new thing. Like preprints also publish studies that aren't complete yet. And so that these are also other things. A study that isn't complete
Okay.
is also like preprints are absolutely worthless. This is not something that I'm going to budge on. Like it isn't like it shouldn't even be considered if it's a preprint, it shouldn't even be considered data. It's somebody's wild rambling opinion that shouldn't be trusted if it's a preprint. Preprints are less than useless, they're less than worthless. And I will stand by that. Like they are actually like the bane. Like you all this hydroxychloroquine nonsense that happened at the beginning of COVID, all this ivermectin nonsense, all of that is preprints. Like all of the nonsense that happened of like people like drinking fish tank cleaner was on the basis of like preprints. Right? Preprints actually harm people's lives. They actually like they're net negative to the scientific discourse, and I hate them.
Okay, so I think a lot of people understand, that there are some issues with this, right? But let's put yourself in the shoes of a parent. Okay, you have a 12-year-old son, and you see the following study that says healthy boys aged 12 to 15 are seeing 162 cases per million of myocarditis compared to a 44 per million rate of getting serious COVID symptoms in the next 120 days. Okay, so that's about 6 times more likely to get myocarditis than to end up in a hospital with COVID. So whether this is
So
peer
so
reviewed or not, if you are a parent, are you saying that you should go ahead and get your kid vaccinated as opposed to maybe waiting for this study to be peer reviewed and wait out and see what the data actually says after a certain amount of time when it's obvious that your healthy 12-year-old boy has virtually non-existent chance of dying of COVID?
um when it comes to people that are in the 12 to 17 range, a lot of them aren't boys or whatever. They're, teenagers. They're like 15, 16, 17. I think that is actually a really, really good case as to why preprint culture is cancer. Because it gets like you can get a lot of like this sensationalist stuff that isn't necessarily true, but like puts fears into people's minds. Um, like um, Once again, if it's in a preprint, if it's not peer reviewed, um, if it's in some sort of preprint print journal, it shouldn't be considered science at all. It shouldn't be considered a study at all. The data should be considered worthless. That's my personal position.
Well, all data
Now,
has to
if
be
if I'm
not peer
somebody,
reviewed
like here's the
before.
thing, I understand, right? Like if somebody, right, sees that data, right, from a preprint, and is worried about the safety of her kid, right? If a mom looks at the data, is worried about the safety of her kid and is wondering and like becomes hesitant. Like I'm not somebody who like looks at people that like are hesitant to get vaccinated and sees them as some sort of subhuman filth, right? Like I know some people on the internet do, and I think that's wrong and completely disavow, right? I'm here to try and like, despite like that rant, right, to kind of try to like assuage like it. I would see it as my like job in that case to like look at like go over to that person and like try to explain and like calmly like because I've seen some very good data, right, that suggests that the vaccine is actually really, really helpful to like people, right? And that even in the myocarditis studies, um, like people often make like big conclusions and like they assume that like it seems like this very, very like small chance of like, what was it? Oh, I forget how many said in a million, but like it's based on a sample size of not even that big, of like not even like a million people in like one part of there, which seems to disappear in the age category, which also seems super odd, and it's also not even peer reviewed study. And so it would be my job, I'd say, to kind of like try to approach the situation with compassion. And personally, I believe that the best decision for everybody is to get vaccinated. You know, it helps prevent, the spread of the disease. It reduces the severity of disease among people that get it. It virtually zeros the chance of getting COVID. And all this other stuff, right? Like I'm not going to go out there condemning, somebody that because the media cycle thrives on preprints and sensationalism had this thing to like, um, this preprint study, given to it. I would almost go so far as to argue that organizations that publish preprints engage in disinformation. Um, like And the difference between that and just somebody that's spreading misinformation is that people that publish disinformation do it absolutely knowingly, for their own benefit. And that's what preprint studies are for me, right? They're less than worthless because they're used by people they can be used to justify almost anything, right? And so, I understand intellectually the position of the mother that has seen this preprint and is hesitant about giving a vaccine to her child. Um, I also don't think that it's like given the bevy of evidence, um, based on the worldwide evidence, based on the worldwide studies, based on the actual like effects of the vaccine, based on the causal and all this other analysis, that uh, even if I can understand it intellectually, right? Like from a like a standpoint, I understand why somebody would think that. I simply think that that person is like wrong, right? Factually. And so it will be my job to try to, convince them otherwise, right? Like, not to, to engage in, formats like this, right? So, not yell at them, and call them names and say that they're being evil because, people react based on the information I'm given. And unfortunately, we live in an environment where, um, you know, a lie travels around the world before the truth can be heard. So,
So let's just say within the next year, this study goes through peer review and it's 100% true. And you do have a 6 times higher rate of getting myocarditis. But you already convinced this mother to get their kid shot up, and they do get
okay.
myocarditis. Would you feel any
Uh,
like remorse in that situation?
uh, well, the evidence shows that it would have been a temporary condition that would have disappeared within 5 months.
Well, the evidence also shows that
And the
COVID is a
and the
temporary condition
and
that
and once
disappears.
well, yeah, no, like obviously, right? But like you also have to like what you have to compare to isn't just a random person. So I think a lot of the errors that people do in this situation, and this is because like I think humans are very, very bad at a few things, right? One of the things that humans are very, very bad at doing is risk assessment. And one of the big things about risk assessment, and I can tell you this like right away, as somebody who's involved in aircraft, is that like a lot of people will be like deathly afraid of going into an aircraft in case it like falls out of the sky. Will be perfectly fine driving on the open road where like the chance of an accident or death is like exponentially higher than like your chance of getting hurt in an aircraft. Like airplanes are designed incredibly well. They're designed with so many redundancies that the chance of like some sort of mechanical failure to happen on the aircraft that's going to send you barreling out of the sky is virtually is nothing. It's like one in there. Like if you travel for like several billion hours, yeah, sure, then that might happen. But like for you as like a random person, it's like probably the safest form of transportation just because of just how incredibly over-engineered aircraft are. They're incredibly efficiently over-engineered to be incredibly safe because of the massive like safety standards that are placed on the aircraft industry. Um, and yet people are more afraid of that than they are afraid of driving. And one of the reasons for that is because they can control, right? They're behind the wheel, and people are very, very bad generally at risk assessment. They're also very, very bad at reading scientific studies. And fortunately, this is kind of the confluence of what we're seeing with this whole COVID vaccine thing. And one of the things about risk assessment is you have to compare the two like likely situations, right? So you can't just compare when it comes to myocarditis that somebody that's getting the vaccine versus somebody that is just a random person, right? Uh, Especially when you consider that the vaccine is the alternative to getting COVID, right? So you don't have the option anymore of not contracting the disease over the next year. You probably will either get vaccinated or have contracted some form of coronavirus. The Delta variant is just that virulent. Every person that gets COVID, that gets sick, on average, right, will spread it to about six other people. You will probably get, you know, the Delta variant. The question is, will you be vaccinated when it happens? And so the question is your chance of getting this myocarditis, is this myocarditis incidence, uh, worth it compared to uh, what you would get as a consequence of just getting COVID? And this is what the vaccine is about. Is about reducing the incidence of, um, you know, COVID versus the virus, and this on like a population level. There will be a few very, very unfortunate cases where, unfortunately, the vaccine either won't work or will be the cause of, very, very serious events. But when compared to the actual virus and the positive health effects of you effectively being immune to the negative effects of the virus following vaccination, it is absolutely worth it to get the vaccine. Now, currently, there's no approval for pregnant women. I don't believe there's a recommendation. So if you're pregnant, you know, for now, if you're worried about like how that'll, affect the growing baby in your womb, you can wait it out for now. If you're under 12, there's no approval yet, even though I think it's probably coming soon. Because data shows that um, it's vastly, worth it. There's, a massive shot at reducing the incidence of serious symptoms, and that all makes sense. There's a massive causal thing, and based on the data that we know now, um, that's simply the best choice for everybody. Um, and yeah, so
Well,
like
so
I
a lot of countries have done this risk benefit analysis that you're talking about. The UK, primarily, the JCVI has not advocated the vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds. The FDA just recently had a panel on booster shots in which they did a risk benefit analysis, and they did not recommend a booster shot for anybody who is not in a high risk category. Now, you said that you
oh
are not in favor of the booster shot, but
yeah.
do you see how this sort of logic is? You could extend this logic. Why are they saying that the booster shot? Why are they not approving it if the risks do outweigh the benefits? It means that they are looking at studies like this. They are looking at these myocarditis studies. They are taking it seriously. They are saying
No,
that there's a
no, no.
legitimate risk.
So, no, no. So that's not really like why the booster shots like aren't getting approved. So like what they're approving is they're approving it as like a part of the COVID, thing, as a part of like the regular treatment. So what they're doing when they say we're approving the two doses, right? What they're saying is for the vaccine to work effectively, what you need is the two doses, right? And that's a part of the immune response. What they're saying with the third dose, with the booster shot, when they're saying they're not approving it for this age range, is that it offers marginal, if any, sort of utility to get it for the people that aren't in the high risk categories. Like that's what it is, right? And so, like when you do these types of approvals, there's like a lot of a secondary tier like consequences to that, right? It's a consequence of like health policy. So like when it comes to like considering somebody fully vaccinated, right? So if they were to go out and say, no, you do require like the third booster shot 6 months after. 6 months after your second dose, if you don't get the booster shot, you're not going to be considered fully vaccinated when it comes to like officially health wise, right? And so by saying no, we're not doing that, right? Then that's not like the science, the data doesn't show any sort of like meaningful increase in the effectiveness of the vaccine with the booster shot after 6 months, for anybody except for people with like very weak immune systems, and that's because they have weak immune systems, and so they need a like an immune booster shot, right? That's kind of the reasoning behind. It's not that the risks outweigh the benefits, right? It's that there aren't any discernible benefits to be gained, and all the immunity for like the vast majority of the people will be retained unless you have like compromised immune system or you're very old, so you have a weaker immune system.
But neither of those things are true. They're coming out. They're saying that the vaccine, two vaccines, no longer
So
provides immunity.
which say because when so everything that I was saying, right? Like the stuff about like nobody was recommending a third dose. When people were trying to like when Biden was saying stuff about the third dose, like almost everybody in the science community was like, no, you're being dumb. That's no, that's not what the data shows at all. Like stop being that. Like we get it. You have a bunch of stock that you bought that you have to either get rid of or like it's gone, right? It's not necessary to like, plug a third vaccine just so that you can get rid of a bunch of stock that you bought. And or like because like the vaccines or some whatever reason. Like I'm being a bit facetious here, but like everybody in the science community was like, no, this just isn't necessary. Like it was an overwhelming response against it. Like what politicians do versus what's actually mandated by the science can be two completely different things, right? Like, so like the third dose was considered basically because like the government was saying that, and because you know what, Pfizer might want to like try to get a third shot approved because it means that they get more money, right? Like there was a question even at the beginning if two shots are necessary. Especially when you have single shot vaccines. But overall, like the FDA looked at the things and it looks like it does work, right? For a third dose, for a second dose for like these vaccines, and that like there is an increase in the immunity. For the third dose, like the decision should be taken as it's basically saying that you don't need, it's not necessary to get us. You can get one if you want, but it's not necessary to like have a full course of vaccination, to be like have the full benefit of the vaccine. Third dose just seems to be like very very marginal at best, and like within any sort of like random error. Like that's really what the data is. Like if you want to say that politicians have said something stupid, man, like politicians have said stupid things all the time throughout history. Like do not confuse what politicians say with the science.
Do you consider Fauci a politician?
I mean, Canada, man, we don't have to deal with Fauci.
Oh,
I'm not here to debate Fauci. Okay, I'm not Fauci, right? I'm me, right?
well, I mean, this is really interesting that you're willing to admit that it
Fauci,
is politicized and that Pfizer does have a lot to gain via advocating for a third dosage, and yet
but it's been
you
rejected
what?
because but it's been rejected because the science is like you look at this
Well, there's
like
plenty of
if you look
countries, case in point, Israel, where you are not considered fully vaccinated unless you have three doses. And this is
right.
where most
So
other countries are headed, unless there is, vehement opposal to this, opposition.
there
And
there was well like here's the thing like because I subscribe to a lot of like medical and science accounts around like the internet like a lot of since I know a lot of people within like the medical community when people proposed third shots there was massive opposition to it like from like a scientific perspective like I'm telling you right now like everybody there was like there was like no this isn't like necessary like Fauci should have been thrown into a closet and kept there from like speaking his mouth because like that guy has probably done more, okay, to increase the incidence of anti-vaxxers than any other person in the US government. Like that guy, I'm very, very annoyed with him because he just says things without thinking. I don't like Fauci, okay? I don't like him at all. But it's not because like everything he says is wrong. It's just because he looks like an opportunistic idiot that's just willing to say whatever he needs to in order to get on to like talk shows. Um, That's just what it seems to be for me. But from like a science perspective, it looks like the vaccine works, right? So just because he says the vaccine works, and just because I don't like Fauci, doesn't mean that he can't be like a broken clock on vaccines. That's what I'm, right? So that's kind of he's a broken clock, but like my me liking the vaccines has absolutely nothing to do with like Fauci.
So, but then once again, you're willing to admit that there's a political angle to this.
I'm, I'm
Why are you confident that this entire coronavirus pandemic hasn't been blown out of proportion the same way that you're claiming things like vaccine hesitancy have been? You're saying that these alarming headlines tend to sell in the media, and that's true. I mean, how many alarming headlines have we seen regarding coronavirus itself when it truly isn't a very deadly disease?
Well, okay. It's one thing to say that it's not really a very deadly disease. The problem is, okay, like there's two metrics, right? The metric of how deadly a disease is, meaning how likely is it to kill an individual, right? But if, like, for example, SARS is a very deadly disease, but it's a very, very low risk of the SARS, like original SARS, not SARS-CoV-2, becoming a pandemic is insanely low because SARS tends to kill the people faster than it can spread, right? On a generalized basis. It's much easier to contain because it spreads very, very slowly. Coronavirus, this one, COVID-19, like SARS-CoV-2, spreads really quickly. And so even if individually it's a lot lower, from like a population scale, it's incredibly deadly and incredibly virulent and has the potential to do stuff like what it's doing in Alberta right now, which is overwhelm the medical system. And so like there was a lot of other risks. So like if you let COVID just run rampant, if you don't get vaccinated, if you don't do all the other things, you run the risk of something like what happened in Alberta, where they opened up before they had an adequate herd immunity. They opened up because they wanted to open up for Canada Day. That's like basically Canada's version of Fourth of July. That was a political decision, right? A policy decision because the premier wanted to look good. He looks like an absolute moron right now with like a minus 55 approval rating because he basically allowed the hospital system to collapse and every single ICU bed in the province to get filled up before he decided that he needed to change an approach. Like you get stuff like that happens, right? Like you get absolute like devastation in the medical system, and you get stuff like, hospitals needing to triage patients because there literally isn't enough room on hospital beds to treat all the patients because, this, this virus. Now, an argument could be made that if Alberta had handled its health system better, right, in years past, then it could have avoided this by having a larger capacity for ICU beds. And it's an argument I'm privy to. But unfortunately, Alberta didn't do that. And today it's in this situation. And you have to, like, you can't, um, base your actions as a government on, like, potential things you could have done. Like, if you were in power 10 years ago and knew this was coming and changed a bunch of stuff and, like, increased the amount of ICU capacity and increase whatever, you're dealing with the facts on the ground now. And the facts on the ground now is that their medical system was overwhelmed, and they had to go back into a massive lockdown because they decided to open up before they were, adequately herd immunity. Like, and this is actually the reason why, originally when people went into lockdown, right, it was to, the reason was, what was it called, flatten the curve, right? And the curve that people want to flatten is they want to keep like the ICU bed usage below like a certain percent so that the medical system doesn't get overwhelmed, right? Unfortunately, that's what they're doing in Alberta, right? That's what happened in Alberta because they decided to open up completely before they had, and when I say open up, as in like they didn't have any sort of testing protocols, like they removed all the things, right? And they didn't even use the opportunity over the past year and a half to build up hospital capacity to prepare for it. Like they made a lot of mistakes, but Alberta made a whole lot of mistakes, and Jason Kenney absolutely deserves to get fired over it. Um, Actually, that might have been a bit of a ramble. Um, what was I saying? But yeah. But yeah, like the vaccine, right, basically prevents a lot of this ICU stuff. Like even if it's not individually more deadly, it is a virus that is this virulent, has a very grave possibility of spreading to parts unknown for a very long period of time, like across society, and causing a lot of like secondary and tertiary problems. Like for example, overwhelming the medical system if you don't have enough people that are vaccinated. So um, I think that everybody should probably get vaccinated. I think that we're approaching herd immunity in most, if not all, provinces, even if Alberta was very, very late, because what happened in Alberta is they reached a certain vaccination threshold, and like the moment they opened up, nobody went to get vaccinated anymore because they assumed everything was behind them. Like that's kind of the danger of doing that, but you know, um that is kind of the story of one province. I know you probably should use it to like extrapolate to other jurisdictions because every jurisdiction has its own rules and its own hospital capacity and its own this and its own that, right? But it's just kind of one example of what can go wrong, right? If you make a bad political decision based on COVID, right? The premier wanted to look good, so he opened up the province before uh before he had herd immunity, so a lot of problems happened as a result. Um, so yeah. Um, like he should have been building up hospital capacity over the past year or so while they were in lockdown. He didn't. That's also on him, right? That's also a policy decision. Um, so yeah, so like if you look at it, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, the question was, do you not think that there's any political aspect to creating hysteria regarding the disease that is really, in fact, not that deadly?
Oh right, yeah. So that's why I mentioned that. Like to call it not that deadly, it's like it's not that deadly individually, but like if you have, for example, the flu, right? And even if individually, right, let's just for the sake of argument. Now I'm just to be clear, YouTube, I'm not saying this. TOS, please don't ban this video.
Oh, I don't
Uh
give a shit. You can say whatever you want. I'm gonna get
right,
banned one day. May as well go out with a bang.
if it let's just say that for an age group it's less deadly than the flu, right? Um but 20 times the amount of people get the coronavirus than will ever get the flu, right? Then more people die from COVID as a result, right? It's just that the flu doesn't spread all that quickly. The flu has a R ratio, so you infect about 1.36 people, like 1 point on average, right? That's the virulence. 1.36 people for every person that gets the flu on average. For the Delta variant, it's 6. So it spreads incredibly quickly. And so it infects a massive amount of people, especially compared to the flu, right? That's the difference. Like you can't like that's why like people are very bad at risk assessment. Like this isn't just something that you do for yourself. This is also something you do for like people around you. And like and also to do stuff like prevent like the overburdening of the hospital system like we saw in Alberta, which is a risk, right? Now can politicians definitely do stuff that's stupid, right? Can politicians do stuff because they think the population wants it? Sure. Just because a politician does it doesn't mean it's true, right? But the vaccines are safe and effective beyond like the politics. The FDA, generally speaking, isn't staffed by political hacks, right? Generally speaking, right, the FDA isn't staffed by like
Well, there's
political
plenty of
hacks,
former Pfizer execs working at FDA
you
right
know,
now, but
but
that's neither here nor there.
that's not here. Like on a when they go to like making decisions and looking at the data and like passing the trials, right? The analysis they do, those people generally aren't doing it for partisan reasons, right? So just because some politician, like you might not trust the motivations of a politician, right? And I can definitely sympathize with that, right? Your decision to take or not take the vaccine should be based on the science, right? On if the vaccine works, right? And if the, like the costs of like taking the vaccine, right? Potential like risks, right? Like if it's a vaccine that gets approved, chances are a lot of that stuff has been done for you, right? A lot of the risk assessment, just like it has in like every other industry, just like it has with like aircraft. When an aircraft goes into the air, there's a rigorous system of like safety that has to be followed, right? Like, and I definitely understood all the people that were like, you know what, I don't want to take it until it has full FDA approval, right? You know what, I can understand that. Like, that's definitely like, you know what, that's your choice, right? It's gotten full FDA approval now, right? And a lot of the people, and I know them, went out and they got the vaccine after that, because that was their thing, right? Because the FDA, right, usually the Canadian, like Health Canada, usually very, very good, right? All this other stuff. The European Health Agency, like every health agency. Now, there's some political nonsense that goes on. Like, we over here aren't going to approve the Sputnik vaccine ever. Russia isn't approving the Western vaccines. That's a political decision, right? Those are political decisions because there's a very obvious like geopolitical nonsense that goes on between Russia and Canada. Sorry, Russia and like United States, right? Like that's why, like the reason why Canada doesn't accept, the Sputnik V vaccine, right? Isn't because that's like political nonsense that's going on. Um, Even though like I looked at the data, the Sputnik vaccine, you know, just as effective as all the others, right? Like on a general scale, right? So I'm not like going here, I'm not shilling for like any one country, right? But like generally speaking, when they approve a vaccine, it's not done for like political purposes. They might exclude certain vaccines because of like stuff, Sometimes it's for political reasons like Sputnik. Sometimes it's because the vaccine's absolute trash like Sinovac, like the Chinese one, don't take it. It's basically water. Like it's useless. You won't get immunity. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your government's money to buy Sinovacs. Like I know a lot of people that are like doc. I know one of my friends. His parents are doctors in Turkey, and they're forced to give out the Sinovacs. They're like, yeah, no, we're waiting for like the Pfizer because we know this thing's like absolutely useless. Like, and we're telling all of our patients to do the same because it's useless. Like Sinovac is useless. But the data shows that almost all the other ones, so Sputnik, the Pfizer, Moderna, um, AstraZeneca, if you're fine with the potential for like if you if you're fine with the potential risk of even though it's a very very low risk and probably lower than the thing, it's still fairly high. And then for the bad batches of Johnson and Johnson, and they've been removed from like the market, the ones that remain, the Moderna and the Pfizer. Uh, Johnson and Johnson was never allowed in Canada, right? And AstraZeneca was pulled really really quickly. So like if you look at like generally speaking, right? Maybe sometimes like one country's approval agency can go wrong, but like it's very, very rare for like many, many countries' approval agencies to like they're not like to make like a hasty decision, right? Like generally speaking, like they're not staffed by like partisan hacks, right? Because that's different. Like, because politics includes a lot of other things. Like, politics includes stuff like policy decisions. So there's like COVID policy decisions, like what I talked about in Alberta. That's not necessarily like the same type of political. They're not like for like they don't have like. Do you know anybody in the FDA? Right? Like, can you name anybody from like the? They're not people that are looking out to like get famous or to enrich themselves, right? They're people that are doing like data analysis because they believe they've decided to go into a job where they could very easily go somewhere else and make a lot more money and look out for your health and safety. And like what you should probably look at is like you should like if you're worried about maybe your country's agency not being like the best, look at what other countries are also doing. And generally speaking, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and the Sputnik V vaccine are the ones that like are safe and effective, without any other things. And the AstraZeneca, um, there's a few more questions about it, But it does give you the immunity if you're willing to take the risk, which is still less risk than having a serious effect from coronavirus on a global level. You know, if you have the choice, always take the Pfizer, Moderna, or the Sputnik V vaccine. That's my point.
So
Like it's
you are saying that there's nobody on the FDA that could possibly have a conflict of interest or possibly a partisan position or have any sort of connection politically or monetarily to a company like Pfizer that really wants everybody to take these vaccines, including booster shots.
well, see, if they were hyper um, if they were making the decision basically just on how to enrich Pfizer, right, they would have approved the booster shots. They didn't because generally speaking, they follow the science. And if you're not, confident in the FDA, right, or your country's thing, look around the world, right? Health Canada, the European Union, the European Union is notoriously bureaucratic. Notoriously bureaucratic states generally don't have like people taking bribes, right, from like large corporations. Uh, you know, sorry, it's German bureaucracy. The EU is a German bureaucracy. They're bureaucrats making the decisions, not partisan hacks. In Canada too, Health Canada is a fairly nonpartisan organization. We don't have nearly the same amount of like partisan divide as you have in the United States. So if all of those agencies are like in agreement that that these things are good, then your chances are then those things are good, right? Like one country might be led wrong, right? All of them, it's it's very, very difficult to do that. It's much more difficult to do that. So, if it was purely just to make Pfizer money, they wouldn't have approved Moderna or any of the other ones, right? Like, you can tell it's a political decision to exclude the Russian vaccine, because there's a fairly you know, geopolitical reason. There's a fairly obvious geopolitical reason why you'd want to do that, especially if you're the one. But if you look at Europe, there are countries in Europe that are approving both the Western and the Russian vaccines, right? Especially ones that trade more with Russia because there's different geopolitical interests, right? Um, you know, but they're not approving it just because it's Russian, right? They're approving it because generally speaking, it works. And that's what the data shows. And Russia is not approving the Chinese vaccine. European countries aren't approving the Chinese vaccine. Canada, United States aren't approving the Chinese vaccine. And generally speaking, it also doesn't work. Um, just look at other countries. And if there's a correlation between what all of the countries approved, and it's most likely work good and it works. And that's the case with the vaccines currently available in the United States and in Canada at the moment.
So you don't think it's possible for all of the governments across the world to make a mutually bad decision that is very partisan?
You see, actually, no, because it's not partisan. The problem is it's partisan basically just in the United States. And I can speculate as to why it became a partisan political issue in the United States, like this vaccine versus non-vaccine. That just doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Because there's
That
no
kind of
anti-vaccine
partisan
protests in
divide.
Australia. There's no anti-vaccine
Okay, okay.
protests in
So
the EU.
what's happening in Australia is that the government has decided to go a bit power crazy, and so there's a bunch of protests there. Just because there's protests, what you call partisan politics is very different from these people that are making decisions aren't making it for partisan reasons because they're part of one party, and this is the political position of one party that what now? That the vaccine works? That's the level of decision making that goes on at Health Canada and the FDA and all the European Union approval agencies. Their job is to say if this thing works or if it doesn't work, right? If it works and if it has any sort of serious side effects that outweigh the fact that it works, right? That's the level of decision making. Everything else, like whether or not to allow, for example, the reason that the Russian vaccine is not being approved is because it's not being allowed to apply, basically. That's a political decision, right? Um, if it were to apply, most likely it would get approved, but it's not applying, right? And neither are Pfizer and Moderna allowed to apply in Russia. Um, like what like vaccine mandates, right? That's a political decision. It has nothing to do with whether or not the vaccine works. That's what these organizations like Health Canada in the European Union, like in Russia, around the world, their job is to determine if vaccine doesn't work. And vaccine does the working right out like is like are there any side effects that would outweigh the fact that it's effective against the disease, right? Um, and it's the same not just with COVID, but with like all the other little things, right? Like that's the level of decision making that goes on there. The FDA doesn't like mandate uh any vaccine like lockdowns or whatever. It doesn't mandate like that's all done by like your politicians. And if you have a problem with that, take it up with your politicians. But don't confuse your politicians making bad decisions with whether or not the vaccine is safe and effective. And the vaccine is safe and effective.
Well, I think I've just seen enough data, right, that I think calls that into enough reasonable doubt that I think that, look, if you believe that it's effective, that's great. And if I don't, uh, I just don't see why it's necessary to force me to get it now. And if you are, like you say, if you are against this partisan politics view of things, if you are against this hysteria, then I think that you should be as vehemently against things like vaccine mandates as people like me.
Oh, I don't like mandates.
Well, there's a difference
I think
between not
everybody should.
liking
I
it
think
and
you're.
then taking a stand against it.
I think that like I think that people should like get the vaccine, right? Like that is something you should do. Like I would highly recommend everybody should get vaccinated. It's the the right thing to do, I think, right? I don't think it's you like I from a policy perspective, when I look at things, right? The vaccine passport in Quebec, I'm absolutely opposed to it. I think it's ridiculous, right? I don't think that it does anything to limit the spread, especially because of the way that things are counted. We're reaching herd immunity. What we should do right now is we should just open up. That's my position. Like we have like 80%, like I'll actually look up the latest number. I might have mentioned something like 78% of the total population is vaccinated in Quebec. We can afford to start just lifting a lot of the restrictions. My problem with a lot of these vaccine passports is that they're absolutely like irrational as to what they apply to and what they don't apply to. What it is, and I can understand it intellectually, is it's the government giving its population what it wants. We have a population where there are a lot of COVID doomers that don't understand the science and who want these types of restrictions. They want forever lockdowns. They want to believe that like they're deathly afraid from the unvaccinated because they've had like a year of fear sewn into them. Whereas like what they should have done is just kind of keep calm, like kind of have like a keep calm and carry on attitude, right? And then waited for the vaccine, then gotten the vaccine. And guess what? Once you have the vaccine, you're protected. And not only that, you're protecting everybody around you. The chance of like so it's just you've done your part. It's not a thing of like should you be rewarded for it, right? Like I'm perfectly fine with like if a private business, and I think you can agree, right? If a private business is like, you know what, we think that our risk of like getting sued by some idiot, right? Because we spread COVID to him and then like his grandma died or whatever, like is more than like the cost of legal battles is more than like the business loss that we're gonna have by saying like no unvaccinated people in our business. I think that it's perfectly like fine for like a private business owner to do that on his own. I don't think it's right for the government to tell that business owner that this is what he must do, right? I think those are two very different things, right? So yeah, like I think you would agree with like private business owner can do what he wants, right? Like that's fine with me, right? And at that point, it's up to the free market if like his competitor allows people that are unvaccinated into the establishment, and that's just the free market at work. But other than that, people should get vaccinated because it's probably the best way to like get us out of like this whole mess. You will, even if you have not a lot to worry about right now, if you don't think so, you'll have zero to worry about after you get vaccinated. And not only that, you won't be able to spread it to like those around you, and and all this other stuff. When it comes to vaccine mandates, when it comes to international travel, countries can do what they want. I'm not going to stop them. It's a sovereign right of a country to determine um, who is able to like enter their nation, right? Like to control their borders. And if they want to put vaccine requirements as a requirement to enter their country, that's absolutely the prerogative of the nation. It's their sovereign right, right? It's their right. It's their sovereign right as a sovereign state to put restrictions on their border like that. When it comes to internal travel, right? I'm a big believer in getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers. So I don't like interprovincial trade barriers. That's also one of my problems with the Quebec vaccine passport system is that it basically puts the onus on businesses to try and figure out what to do with out of province people, because basically there's no vaccine passport system for them. It's absolutely insane. But like basically, if you're from out of province and you decide to eat in an establishment, you risk like getting a $6,000 fine that I find is ridiculous. If the police officer isn't satisfied with your proof from out of province, or that you're actually from out of province and not faking it. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's designed as like security theater to make people feel safer because our province is like dominated by COVID doomers. Like, but don't get that mixed up with me saying you should probably get vaccinated because guess what? It works and it's best for your safety and it's best for everybody around you's safety. And it helps and if the state's medical system, like it is in Alberta, right? So what happened in Alberta is that not enough people got vaccinated. So they had to go back into lockdown because their medical system got overwhelmed. Um, and you can argue that it's also because they didn't build enough hospital beds before, but that doesn't change the fact that like they only have so much capacity now, and that capacity is almost overwhelmed because they opened up before they had herd immunity. And so my position is that once you hit herd immunity, open everything back up, just remove everything. But before that, you have to be careful.
All right. Well, I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'll
All
finish
right.
up. But I'll say, I mean, it sounds like you're at least you have a reasonable or more reasonable position than most people by being anti-mandate. And I mean, if you look at the data and you think you have done your research and you think that the vaccine is healthy, I'm I think that's fine. I mean, go ahead and get it. And if I do my research and I look at different studies and I think that it's not in my best interest and you're okay with not forcing me to get the vaccine, I think that that's a perfectly, humane way of interaction. And I mean, if we can be on the same page about that, I think that that's a good
Yeah.
thing. Uh,
All right.
and yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we could go back and forth for hours.
Yeah.
I'll show a study, you'll show a study, and
Yeah.
we'll try
Probably.
and convince each other. But
All right.
yeah, this is the ultimate thing here is that I think a lot of people, like me, we just don't feel comfortable, and we want more information, and we want more transparency, and we don't want to be forced into doing something that might not be in our best interest.
All
Uh,
right. So, I mean, so it's the ending question. So, what kind of data would you want to show that it's like, so you're saying more data, but what kind of data is the question, right? And this is something I think everybody that kind of hasn't like should think of, like what kind of data, because as a lot of people on the internet might want to say, it's like we're running the largest experiment like possible. There's like billions of doses have been given out. And so far, billions of doses have been given out, and it seems like everywhere that it's reduced the chances of any sort of serious effects to happen to you. And because of that, it reduces the um what's the word, the load on the medical system, and it helps everybody recover, and it helps prevent the need for like more lockdowns to flatten the curve, right? Like, as much as it's a meme now because of like 2 weeks to flatten the curve way back when, like there was a purpose to it, to these lockdowns, right? Like, I think that like if you do a lockdown, it should be for a purpose, and that purpose is to not overwhelm the medical system. And so if the medical system's about to be overwhelmed, like it actually happened in a province in Canada, right? Like, this isn't just some like edge case, right? It's possible that it happens. So if not enough people get vaccinated, it's likely that it's going to be necessary, unless you're okay with the medical system being overwhelmed, right? Which is, a once again, a policy decision, right? But like, once again, like, I'm perfectly fine with coexisting with people that are unvaccinated. We just kind of have to understand like on higher level policy, and like I don't think anybody should be forced to do anything that they don't want to. Like, just to be clear, right?
Right.
Right. And once again, like, those things are temporary, right? Like, once the thing gets below the certain level, there's going to be like loosening of restrictions, because the point of that should be to make sure the medical system isn't overwhelmed, right? And I think we can agree to, like, the goal of that should be that, regardless of whatever politician says, right?
Right.
Right. So like,
But like you
yeah, so
say,
like if you
we're kind of at that threshold right about now, like you said, with herd immunity, and like you
well,
said, right now you
we are
think that,
in Quebec, right? We're at that
yeah,
threshold, like where I live right now, right, which is Quebec, right? America's less vaccinated. Um, some states probably are, right? Like, but that's what I say. Like, once you reach a certain threshold of like herd immunity, right? I think you should just open up and like forget about the restrictions, right? Because at that point, um, if at that point, if everybody's vaccinated, and like, you know, people are just gonna have to, you know, open up. Like, it's like, once you reach the herd immunity threshold, open it back up, and because at that point you've done what you could, and everything else is, you know, I guess, punishment for our hubris, that we tried to play God in a lab and do gain of function research, and then
yeah,
also entrusted that to the communists.
yeah, and then you can get into the whole anti-technology debate, and maybe
It's at that point, if we're all 100% vaccinated and we're still dying in droves, at that point it's just like, that's just punishment for our hubris, thinking we could play God and like, do gain of function research on like, and then also trust the security of those facilities to Chinese communists, because we all know the communists are great with security and safety.
yeah. Uh, all right, well, I gotta get off. Thanks for having a chat and sitting
All right.
down.
All right. Hey, likewise. See you later, man.
And
Oh,
if you want
cheers.
to post a link to any of your stuff, I'll post it in the live chat. And
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
there's a live chat?
Oh yeah, this is getting streamed.
Ooh, okay.
The live
What?
chat was
Yeah,
very
okay. I thought.
the live chat was
Oh,
very much
oh, okay.
against you,
I
so you
looked up on
probably
YouTube. Was there anybody in chat? Was there any comments?
there was a lot of comments, and you probably don't want to read them.
Oh,
Well, just remember that it's my audience, so. Uh, but that's okay. Yeah, I posted the Trovo link on the. I'll give you the Trovo link, and you'll be able to read the live chat, if you have any interest. But yeah, I'll post your links there, and yeah. So once again, thanks for sitting down, thanks for chatting, and yeah, I will see you around.
okay. Bye bye.